Hi guys, it's Mr. Vandergriff, and I'm here with the Great Insect Adventure. In this video, I want to talk about the next generation science standards and how this Great Insect Adventure will help walk you through some of the science and engineering practices, some of the cross-cutting concepts, and some of the next generation science standard DCIs. So let's get started. One of the DCIs is molecules to organisms, and that is supported in this project. We've got also ecosystems, so much ecosystems when it comes to the insect project. We've got genetics and genes and heredity and traits, and then, of course, biological evolution. You can see the moss here adapting to the different colored bark on the trees. Now, on top of just some core ideas, mainly is going to be in our life science and biology, we have the cross-cutting concepts. So, for instance, patterns. Take out this close look at these eyes. They are absolutely gorgeous. And scientists, again, are looking for patterns. You can see patterns in all these different insect eyes. In the last video, we talked about how with biomimicry, they're trying to make drone cameras using some ideas from studying the patterns in insects' eyes. Look at the patterns in some of the wings. We already talked about the pterostigma here, how it gives stability to the wing. You can see some wings very close up have hair-like structures. There's a lot of patterns. Studying those, you can learn quite a bit. Also, cause and effect. You're looking at the most dangerous animal in the world that's responsible for more human death than any other animal. Yes, the mosquito. And malaria alone is, I consider, if you don't consider malnutrition a disease, is probably the biggest killer, with I think affecting over 200 million people, maybe killing 2 million a year. Don't quote me on that, but again, it's killed millions and millions of people over the years, and it's a protozoan that's inside of the mosquito. But also, you've got yellow fever, you've got Asian tiger mosquito, that's dengue, and chikungunya. Excuse me, chikungunya. The chikungunya right here is a horrible, horrible disease. And then you've got West Nile virus. These are all transmitted. The vector, the one that carries the disease, is the mosquito. And this right here is a mosquito-borne disease called elephantiasis. We used to have this in the United States till we eradicated that mosquito. But there's the normal leg of the individual and the leg that's been infected right here from the mosquito, and then the disease, elephantiasis, where it really, really, really just swells up, and you can't just put a needle in there and pull out the fluid, because it's not just in the cells, but in the interstitial fluid as well. So we talked about scale and proportion and quantity. These are the ways that scientists are thinking. So look at the size of that. So size and scale and proportion. Quantity, we know there's 350,000 different species of beetles. We know the size, the scale can be huge or really small, right? Here's huge. And we talked about could be just a couple millimeters in length. Again, Goliath beetle right here. We already talked about that. There's me in Gabon, Africa. I think I've mentioned this before. There's Dr. Philippe and some specimens. So they are literally huge. Actually, I forgot I've got one right here. Look at that thing, man. Wow. That thing is huge. All right, back you go. I think I had another one. Let's see, this one. Yeah, this one's from the Amazon, I believe. All right. So let's go on to scale. Again, this is the variety. And then system and system models. So again, an insect, its body can be considered a mod or a system model, right? Here's the boundaries. And then energy is going in as they eat, right? Then it's being used and expended energy. And then obviously as waste comes out. So the flow of energy and matter, we can learn a lot in that cross-cutting concept. These are leafcutter ants here that actually chew up the leaf, but then they take them down there and then they put little bits of fungus and they grow fungus and they actually eat the fungus. This right here, the cross-cutting concept of energy and matter. So I remember, about 5 years ago when I was in the Tambo Potter Research Center with some students. I was down there and we were just sitting in the jungle, in the rainforest quietly, listening. And all of a sudden I see these amazing little beetles walking by me. And I didn't know that they were dung beetles. I actually took this photo here. This is a male and female. You can see little mites on them. But what they do is they take monkey dung and they eat and they lay their eggs in the monkey dung. And it's just interesting how they will, the waste, the energy going out and the matter going out of the monkey then goes inside of them, right? And I actually took a little video. Here's the monkey dung, and I think the beetle's here. So I'm there quietly videoing. So let's take a look at this. Kind of thinking about energy and matter, how it flows in and out of the system.
I found this dung beetle. Looks like monkey dung here, and this dung beetle's moving. It's a beetle that specializes in, I think it lays its eggs in the dung. And so I'm gonna video it here. It's pretty cool.
There it is. I think I have one more. Do I have one? Yeah, I have one more. I think you can see it right there. And there's the monkey dung. Okay, see that? Look at that thing. And there's the monkey dung, and it's looking for more. That thing is amazing. And then you could do structure and function with that giant horn right there. Right? Yep, structure and function. Here, look at these different horns. They have different jobs. Remember, the structure is the shape, and the function is the job that does. This one kind of looks like a shovel. And I'll end with just this video right here. With this. So listen to how these scientists, these entomologists, are thinking about structure.
University of Montana biologist Doug Emlin studies these guys.
Let's just put this in perspective. These are among the largest outgrowths of any kind of weapon that you see in any animal.
And you would not expect a beetle that has a giant pitchfork sticking out of its forehead to be able to fly at all, let alone fly well.
That thing barely can fly.
That's Emlin's PhD
like
student
that.
Aaron McCullough, who studies these rhinoceros beetles in the field.
You can definitely hear them sort of roaring as they come to the tree. And they don't land gracefully on the tree, they just sort of like bump into it and scramble off.
They're headed to gashes in the tree where the sap is leaking out.
And the males fight for access to these sap sites.
It's pretty dramatic.
It is dramatic. So they try and pry their opponents off trunks and branches of trees, and it's like a crowbar. You can definitely watch intense fights for hours.
Well, if you're an entomologist. Anyway, it's not surprising these fights are so intense because there's more than sap at stake.
So the females come and feed at these sap sites, and the males fight over access to these sap sites because the males that gain access to the sap sites get to mate with the females.
In other words, size matters.
The males with the longest horns have the highest reproductive success.
That makes the horn something called a sexually selected trait. A la
Male ornaments, male weapons, the tusks of elephants, or the long tails of birds. There's this idea that sexually selected traits, they'll keep getting bigger and bigger until there are some fitness or survival costs that ultimately limit how big they can get. It's interesting in the beetles that I haven't found any evidence that there are important fitness costs. The horns don't appear to be costly in terms of how well the beetles fly. The horns don't appear to stunt the growth of other structures.
So if costs aren't limiting size, what is?
I think is going on in this species is that the horns reach some sort of mechanical limit.
They snap, which is no good for beetle battles.
No, if you have a broken horn, I think you're out of the game when it comes to prying off your rivals.
And what causes the horns to grow big in the first place?
These traits are exquisitely sensitive to nutrition.
Specifically, the insulin pathway regulates growth, Emlin found. So a beetle can't grow a big horn without being well fed, but once it has one, it seems like there's very little cost to pay. And that might help explain why these extreme extremities exist in the first place.
If they're not costly, then the beetles are sort of free to take on a bunch of crazy horn shapes and sizes.
I think I've heard of that idea before. Cutting costs leads to growth.
Yeah, that was crazy. So hopefully this has been helpful. Have you seen the Next Generation Science Standards in the Great Insect Adventure? So again, the DCIs, mainly we're going to be focusing on life science, but there's a lot of physics involved in the physical science as well. And then the cross-cutting concepts is how scientists think or entomologists think, and they're looking at structure and function here. But did you notice what happened after they studied and started thinking? Then they started to ask questions. which is a science and engineering practice. So again, when you're out there collecting your insects, start asking questions. Are there certain plants that insects congregate at? Do they come out at a certain type of day or night? Or is this one noxious or poisonous? Is this one... so again, begin to ask questions. And then from those questions, you actually could probably do an investigation or an experiment. You could put out, as different sugared waters or different flavored things and see if that attracts insects. So again, those are all types of investigations that you can base off of your questions, and your questions come from you making observations about the natural world. So hopefully this video is helpful and that you're going to be a part of the great insect adventure. Bye for now. It's Mr. Vandergriff.